Hello, and thank you for joining us for today's panel discussion. I am Aretha Lafayette, Program Manager for Research Education Program Development and Outreach in the Office of Research and Innovation. I will serve as the session MC for today's discussion. Before we begin this program, we would like to make a land acknowledgement. UT Dallas stands on land originally settled and occupied by the Caddo, Wichita, and Comanche people. We recognize the legacy of colonization and the harm caused by the forced removal of Indigenous people from these lands. UT Dallas continues to benefit from the contributions of Indigenous students and employees on our campus, and we are committed to ongoing support for the Native culture that is essential to our community. For more information on the history of the land UT Dallas occupies, the Caddo Confederacy, and relevant treaties, please visit the Multicultural Center website. This webinar provides an overview of shifting PI demographics at major funding agencies and how mid-career researchers can build competitiveness. Attendees will walk through federal and foundation programs well suited to mid-career researchers and discuss diversification in grant seeking. Here to offer this period of instruction is Paul Tuttle. Paul began his career in research administration in 2001 as a funding opportunity specialist. Since then, he has focused on pre-award and proposal development, managing those functions at 3 UNC system institutions. Later, at a for-profit grant writing company, he hired and supervised what became a team of 16 grant consultants, serving nearly 500 United States clients in 4 sectors: higher education, K-12, nonprofits, and healthcare providers. After returning to North Carolina A&T State University, the nation's largest HBCU, to serve as the Director of Proposal Development February 2015 to January 2022, he has returned to Hanover Research as a grants consultant. Paul holds a master's in arts in English with a concentration in rhetoric and composition. His persuasive writing background has enabled him to assist faculty researchers and senior university administrators in securing over $175 million in sponsored programs and research awards over the last 2 decades. He has participated in the National Council of University Research Administrators since 2001, the Society of Research Administrations International since 2003, and the National Organization of Research Development Professionals since 2012. He was the 2018-2019 president of SRIA's North Carolina chapter and was a 2018 through 2022 member of NORDP's Board of Directors. He continues to be an invited presenter at statewide, regional, national, and international conferences in research administration and research development. Paul, thank you for joining us. You have the floor.
Thank you so much, Aretha. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. Welcome to a little change in the title, Research Career Development for Mid-Stage Investigators. I thought there might be a word missing, so I've inserted it, as a grant writer would do. So today's agenda, we're going to, as Aretha said, we're going to talk about the shifting demographics of principal investigators, and we're going to talk about how to deal with those shifting demographics and remain competitive or even become more competitive at mid-career by reevaluating and refreshing your research trajectory, and also, of course, your grant-seeking strategies to support it, and by targeting new funding sources and or seeking funding sources appropriate to your career stage, and of course, learning how to collaborate even more effectively and efficiently. At the end, we will have Q&A, but during, if you have a question, you can always put it in the chat or in the Q&A, and Aretha will alert me to the fact that there's a question, and she'll also judge whether it's relevant to the discussion of the moment, and raise it so that I can answer it right then in the moment. So let's start with the bad news. You are the red dots. People older than you are the green triangles. People younger than you are the blue diamonds. This is from 2018. We have no reason to suspect that those lines will not continue onward as well. They have been forecast through, yes, 2023 and beyond. And yes, there's a problem. And it means that, well, for new investigators and early stage investigators at places like NIH, once those policies were implemented, there was a swift little hiccup, little jump there. You see the blue diamonds for the relatively junior faculty members, but you also see that people who are senior members of the principal investigator cohort, those individuals are, well, it's all about getting more and more and more money for them. And for your age group, unfortunately, it's all about getting less and less, and you have to fight harder for those dollars. So we're going to talk about that right now. Basically, to interpret, the science of science says that basically the rich get richer, and that these feedback loops that create these trends, the feedback loops, mean a lack of diversity and also a focus on predictable discoveries over unexpected discoveries. And so, unfortunately, it's a breeding environment for risk-averse scientists. And yes, that means that some agencies, even though they say they want innovation, what they really want is incremental little tiny baby steps forward, because that's what's been funded. So I'm going to talk about that in a little greater depth and how to break out of that trap by asking you to reevaluate and refresh where you are at mid-career. And this is going to be, sorry, biologists, it's going to be a 4-petal flower. This is very unusual, biologists, I know that, but it's a good way to represent it. And we're going to be talking first about positioning, then second about publications, affiliations, and appointments, third about funding, and fourth about training and outreach. So positioning, what are we talking about here? We're talking about where you are in your career, where you are in your field. So in essence, you should step back and take that proverbial 30,000-foot view. And yes, the ground looks pretty far away from where you are when you're at 30,000 feet. But the questions are, what are the current trends in the field? And of course, the unspoken question is, where are you in relation to those current trends? Second question here, what are the key gaps in knowledge that are hindering the advancement of the field? And well, the key question for you is, where do you plant your flag of discovery? And then third, how is your research positioned in relation to trends and current challenges? What's going on? How are you aligned with these trends? How are you on the leading edge, perhaps, of a very interesting field, one that requires work in order to gain more knowledge? So think about those your answers to those questions as they relate to your career, as they relate to where you are in your career. And then second, take a critical look at your publication record. The first big question, have you published all of your findings, especially those findings that came from externally funded grants? Have you published all of them? If you have not, now's the time to dig out some of those results, outcomes, conclusions, and think about, where did they go? How will you enhance or increase the knowledge in the knowledge base in your field, or in the cross-disciplinary area in which you work? Of course, another question is, have you published with trainees? Have you showed that you can mentor someone, a graduate student, a postdoctoral fellow, a junior faculty member, perhaps, who's doing some further training in their field, further education, or even an advanced undergraduate? Have you published with them, and have you found a way to make sure that their ideas and your ideas have struck sparks off of each other, so that you do in fact have some innovative things to say in your publications? Have you published with a core group of collaborators, your long-term research family, the people who have similar or complementary expertise? Have you published with them? Have you published even more as you are working with them more? And of course, how does your publication record compare to the publications of your peers? Now, I just want to stop right here and say, yes, it is a huge hurdle to jump that first move from assistant professor to associate professor with promotion and tenure. That's a huge hurdle to jump, because that means you have to produce, you have to be collegial, you have to seem as though you are a colleague who is someone that the people in your department and school and college and university want to have around for the long term. Well, you're there, you've done it, you've got associate professor on your business cards, on your letterhead, and at the bottom of your emails. So where do we go from here? You also need to assess your affiliations and your appointments at this career stage. Are you affiliated with internal and external groups and centers? Can you say that you are a member of a fast-moving, high-flying group of investigators? What appointments do you hold? The appointments meaning what different jobs, what different positions, what different sets of responsibilities do you have? At this stage in your career, you're no longer struggling to get tenure. Instead, you're past that, you're above the fray in that sense, but you are presumed to be at a place in your career where you have been able to streamline certain things so that you can do even more in giving back to your field, or again, to that interdisciplinary nexus where you do your work. And of course, how do your affiliations and appointments compare to those of your peers? In terms of funding, how has your funding evolved? What funding have you received so far? Have you received primarily, for instance, single investigator funding or small team funding? Or have you started thinking about center scale or larger kinds of opportunities that you would be managing as a principal investigator or co-investigator? What kinds of relationships do you have with program officers or program managers? How do you maintain those relationships? Do you network? Do you pick up the phone and call? Do you email people back and forth? Do you see them at conferences? How do you maintain those relationships? And of course, how does your funding level compare to those of your peers? Remember that at this stage, most people typically are expected to be thinking about managing others, not just managing themselves, but managing others. Earlier as an assistant professor, and earlier than that as a graduate student and a postdoc, you were all about managing yourself and managing yourself efficiently and effectively for career success. But for this career stage, what it's all about is basically beginning to learn how to manage others and collaborate in large groups and navigate the sometimes shall we say uneven and varying waters of collaboration and management, people management. So in training and outreach, this is why I talked about management, because many people will assume that if you have experience with trainees and outreach policies, projects, if you have those, then basically you do know how to manage people. You do know how to train and mentor students or other faculty members who are junior to you, who go on to be successful in their careers. You do know how to create a solid publication history with trainees, and you have reached out to trainees or mentees from underrepresented groups, and you have participated in educational and community outreach. So that really it's all about the fact that at this point in your career that you can say yes, and yes, those records are very good to these questions that are here on the slide. But there's more to do. So let's talk about how to strengthen these key elements: the positioning, the publications, affiliations, and appointments, the funding, and the training and outreach. In terms of positioning, you should be ready at this point to go out on a limb a little bit, identify new challenges, and incorporate innovative concepts into your work. You're willing to go out on a limb a little bit also by pursuing leadership opportunities, the last bullet on the slide. And of course, you're willing to bring others around you and serve as that magnetic central point that attracts others to your work, in collaborating more effectively and efficiently, in involving trainees and mentees, in working with others, in managing others, in understanding the fundamental truth that science is, yes, social. In terms of publications, affiliations, and appointments, you will want to publish more with collaborators, trainees, and mentees. You will want to make sure that those publications are in fact useful, push the field forward, that they essentially enrich and enhance the knowledge base in the field. And you will want to seek additional internal and external affiliations and take on multiple appointments. You'll want to do more. You'll want to show that you can handle an even larger burden than you have before, because you know the secrets of how to streamline those burdens in the background so that you can actually do more in giving back to the field. Remembering that you having your terminal degree, that means that that's the stamp of approval from not only the university that gave you that degree, but also from your field in which you earned that degree. That's the stamp of approval that you can be an independent investigator. Well, you learned how to do that as an assistant professor. Now, as an associate professor, you're ready to turn around and give back to your field. Then, in terms of funding, the whole question here is, are you ready for the larger awards? Are you ready for the larger teams? Are you ready to lead larger initiatives or participate in larger initiatives? Are you ready to, for example, target new funding agencies to diversify your funding portfolio? Are you ready to think about alternatives? You've been going back to the well at NIH for years and years and years and years and years. Okay, what about the Department of Defense CDMRP, Congressionally Directed Medical Research Programs? They are, frankly, high risk, high reward, and they will allow you to go out on a limb with fewer preliminary data than NIH will. Just saying, as a possibility there, as one example. If you're in the health sciences, biomedical or behavioral sciences. You also want to, at this stage, if you are in a place where you can think about fellowships and sabbaticals and other kinds of brief pauses in your efforts, you want to pursue those fellowships and sabbaticals to reflect on and refresh your research trajectory, to recharge and to regain that feeling of excitement and momentum and moving forward and thinking carefully about, okay, here I am. I'm 10 years, 15 years past earning tenure. What do I do now? Well, there are lots of things that I can do because I have a PhD and I have the stamp of approval to be an independent investigator. which also means being a lifelong learner, which also means that I can pivot to different opportunities and think about new trends and new tracks or investigations, and follow my excitement more and more and more. So that's part of it here at this stage in your career. And then in terms of training and outreach, yes, please do give back by pursuing training grants that support individuals and cohorts, and that help them ready themselves to apply for fellowship and career development awards themselves. And you would want to make sure that you think about translational research, NIH terms, bench to bedside. Also consider finding ways to reach out to communities and community stakeholders, and include community outreach and dissemination in your research plans. Even consider doing research with communities, community-based participatory research, CBPR. Consider doing those things. Consider making the world a better place from your now lofty standpoint. So let's talk about targeting new funding sources. So to build capacity for center scale and large awards, you would want to get some understanding of who the people need to be around you. You would need to explain to yourself and to others that you need appropriate research teams, appropriate affinity groups or working groups, appropriate initiatives, and a core group of collaborators, these first two bullet points in the top left. You'll want to make sure that you have similar people and also people who think very differently from you, but who listen just as you will listen to them, so that you can again strike sparks off of their very different perspectives, including interdisciplinary perspectives, and so that you can come toward a compelling center scale or large award project concept, come toward that from a multiplicity of perspectives, so that you can actually approach the problem or the large set of or series of problems, so that you can approach that from different perspectives that will help you really truly solve or partly solve some of those issues. Identify leaders. Those leaders might be you, or they might be somebody else who you can learn from. You would want to learn from as many people as you can in terms of pursuing a collaborative strategic planning process to map out a team vision and goals, to map out a long-term funding trajectory, to build strong relationships. All those three really require you to grow outside of yourself, instead of what you used to do, which was look inward and do the assistant professor thing by improving yourself and your approaches. Now you're looking outward, and you're looking for connections, and you're looking for ways in which to interweave with others, and again strike sparks off of their interesting brains in the same way that they're going to strike sparks off of yours. You're going to want to make sure that your team vision has institutional support. Yeah, talk it up. I know many of you are modest introverts, but talk it up. Go ahead and put the peacock feathers up and say, I'm really curious about this, and I really think it can be important for our institution, for the department, for the center, for the laboratory, for the school or college, for the university as a whole. I think this can be really important for us because it aligns with what I want to do. Well, you don't start there, but it aligns with what I want to do. It aligns with what your team wants to do. It aligns with what your chair and your dean want to do, or if you're in an administrative role, what your supervisor and unit head want to do. And it aligns with the research perspectives and trajectory and enterprise of the entire institution. So it's all about finding that good fit, that alignment with all of those things. In the same way, you're going to be looking outward to the external funding agencies to, next to last bullet point here on this slide, find a good fit funding mechanism. So again, it's all about looking outward, finding alignment, and you're going to want to allow sufficient time to develop and submit a winning proposal. Now, I know that some of you may be thinking, I can crank out a proposal in, hours. Well, yes, you may, but a winning proposal, having thought through all the ins and outs, having considered all the edges, all the possibilities, that takes time, and that's the only invariant. So think about ways to supercharge your thinking. Think about ways to bounce ideas off of others. Many people, just saying as a former writing teacher, many people brainstorm together on Zoom calls or Teams calls, and then they make sure they record it so that the transcript is right there so they can copy and paste into a document. Think about that. There's also, if you're brainstorming by yourself, remember that we come to language first by speech, most of us, first by speech, and second by pen and paper, and third by keyboard and mouse. So if keyboard and mouse doesn't cut it, go back a step and try pen and paper, or go back another step and try voice, and look at your smartphone and see whether you can use a voice memo function to capture that idea in the middle of the night when you wake up and say, wait, I've got it. I know what to do. And you speak so quickly because you're so excited that you can't capture it with your pen, you can't capture it with the keyboard, but you can capture it with a voice memo function or something similar. Or if you have a very, very, very good professional friend and colleague who you can wake up in the middle of the night, you can say, excuse me, but can you just listen to this? And if they type fast, or if they can capture all the information, then they can be truly your good professional collaborator. Just saying that you need to capture those ideas, and you need to think of ways to cull everything extraneous and go with the exciting things, and go with the wonderful opportunities, the wonderful visions, the wonderful project concepts. So think about targeting new funding agencies as well as reassessing where you are in your career, as well as reassessing what you have done and what you're currently doing and what you want to do. Also target new funding agencies. Think about new ways to view your work. Think about incorporating, for example, new populations or new perspectives, or think about ways to repackage your work, excuse me, for new funders. You can also shift gears from purely basic research-oriented work to applications of your research. You would think about small external funding or internal seed funding to obtain preliminary data or to pivot in other directions. And you would also want to explore seemingly unlikely funders. I note here that Department of Energy funds environmental remediation. Do you know why? All those weapons producing factories were toxic, and now we have to remediate them with either chemicals in the soil, or taking the soil away and applying chemicals and then putting the soil back, or using plants that fix the toxins and leach them from the soil, like mushrooms, using plants to get the toxicity down. So so U.S. Department of Energy funds environmental remediation, and as we said earlier, Department of Defense funds research in healthcare, and you may not know this either, and the social sciences. So also, some major foundations support research investigations as well as programmatic ideas. So think about that. Think about exploring these funders that you might not have noticed before in your push to develop yourself as an assistant professor and to achieve tenure, and to jump that hurdle. So think about targeting new funding agencies. So one of the most impressive of these possibilities is NSF's Mid-Career Advancement Program. This is relatively recent, but it does enable the investigator, you, to ensure your professional health and vitality of your investigations at a fairly sensitive career stage. And you want to take a look at this if you do work in any of the areas that NSF funds, you'll want to take a look at this because it provides protected time and resources and the means to gain new skills. Remember, you're also a lifelong learner via partnerships, typically with researchers at other institutions. Now, the dollars and timeframes will vary across directorates, so you are strongly encouraged to discuss your MCA, mid-career advancement idea, with an NSF program officer. But just wanted to let you know that this is one that is almost tailor-made for you, which is why I put it first here in this list of specific opportunities for your career stage. Two more are the Department of Energy's Argonne National Laboratory Faculty Sabbatical Leave Program, and also the Office of Naval Research's Summer Faculty Research and Sabbatical Leave Programs. So basically, these two programs allow you to visit a national laboratory, either under the umbrella of the Department of Energy or the Office of Naval Research, and you go and you have a chance to get out of the whirlwind of your current work and stop spinning for a moment and instead say, okay, where am I? What am I doing? Where am I going? And asking those fundamental questions to connect with that excitement that you had and hopefully still have as a researcher, and find ways to use these opportunities to reflect and reassess and basically retarget your research trajectory. There's also from NIH at KO7. There's development awards for more junior candidates and also leadership awards for more senior individuals. So you'll have the KO7 live link on these slides when you receive them. Also, the K18 Research Career Advancement Award is another NIH award for people in your shoes and at your career stage, for established investigators, either full-time or part-time support for experienced scientists to augment or redirect their research programs. You're hearing a theme here, I hope. Augment or redirect your research programs through the acquisition of new research skills or to make changes in your research careers by acquiring new research skills or knowledge. So basically, it's all about, again, being a lifelong learner, learning more, and pivoting, perhaps slightly, or perhaps more than just slightly, with this new knowledge, these new skills, this new expertise, and moving forward in ways that you hadn't been able to move forward before, perhaps because you didn't have that expertise before the K18 award or one of these other possible awards. Now, here's an interesting one. NSF's Re-Entry to Active Research Program, RARE. Yeah, this admits that there are potentially people out there, not you, but other people out there who have perhaps not been as active as they wish to be, or as active as their department chairs or deans wish them to be. And so this is a possible way for those people in chemistry and chemical and bioengineering and environmental transport systems area, supported by NSF, those people doing work in those areas can actually basically come back to doing active research by re-engaging using this award. So if this is you, don't be embarrassed. Go ahead and apply for it, and you are basically returning from a temporary hiatus. And you're trying to come back into active research, and there's a possibility that NSF RARE will reinvest in your work. Note that the rare research proposal must describe potentially transformative research that falls within the scope of participating CBET or CHE programs. So that means that you need to look at NSF's definition of what transformative means. And your project idea, your project vision needs to align with that in order to take advantage of this, if this is your situation. Okay. NSF also has, in the Division of Molecular and Cellular Biosciences, a Transitions to Excellence program. It enables, look at the first sentence there, it enables researchers with a strong track record or prior accomplishment to pursue a new avenue of research or inquiry. Again, the theme is to collect, assess, and find new paths. So here's an opportunity to allow mid-career or even later stage researchers, associate or even full professorship, for people who are associate or full professors, to expand or make a transition in their research programs via a sabbatical leave or similar mechanism of professional development, and then develop that research program in their own lab. So if this is your situation, here's a possibility. And if you're in molecular and cellular biosciences, here's a possibility. And then here's a building capacity in STEM education research opportunity. EHR is now EDU, but still they call some of their programs EHR. And this is broadening the pool of researchers who can advance knowledge in STEM education. So if you're finding yourself interested in STEM education and you're a STEM faculty member and you're working in a field that is supported by NSF, then there you are. There's an opportunity. You can expand your areas of expertise. You can acquire the requisite knowledge and skills to conduct rigorous research in STEM education. So if you're thinking that this is becoming more and more interesting to you as your career moves forward, then think about STEM education research and using this kind of opportunity in order to gain greater depth and breadth of expertise in STEM education research. Here's something from the Pharma Foundation. There's, again, mid-career. It's right there in the title. That's you. Just as NSF had mid-career advancement, Pharma Foundation has mid-career faculty grants. And so there is a value assessment and health outcomes research space that you need to be in. But this program provides a research grant of $100,000 for 1 year. And so if you're eligible and if you are in this space, working in this space already, then it's time to think about the Pharma Foundation. And then, of course, there are other examples. I just wanted to note that, for instance, at the top right, the NIH Mentored Quantitative Research Development Award, this K25 award enables you to learn more about quantitative means of doing research, quantitative methods, quantitative results, how to interpret the quantitative aspects. If you never had that kind of training, or if you had what you feel is inadequate to what you want to do, think about the NIH Mentored Quantitative Research Development Award. And there are others on this page, and each one of these is a live link. Something you need to do even more is also think about not only the environment around you, but the people around you. So you will need to collaborate more effectively and efficiently. And as we know, yes, collaboration fosters innovation. And the last bullet point is probably the most important here. To heighten innovation, you need to network and collaborate with PIs from a wide variety of perspectives, different fields, different groups, different genders, different career levels, different. Learn to appreciate difference and learn how, second bullet point from the top, learn how approaches from complementary disciplines can be applied to existing problems, leading to the development of innovative solutions. For example, approaches from the arts or from the humanities can be applied to problems in medicine and science, and that might open up new avenues for funding for you and or your team. Collaborative networking. Again, science, social. Reach out to people from different fields at your institution. Let me just say, very short story here. I was very clever 3 institutions ago. I was very clever and allowed a grant writing workshop to have a long pause in the middle of the day right after lunch. And as I hoped would happen, people who were from very different disciplines sitting at the same table started saying, who are you? What do you do? How do you do it? Why do you do it? We got somewhere between 12 and 15 proposals out of those discussions. That long, slow time, about 20 or 30 minutes when people were saying, well, isn't the speaker supposed to start up soon? I was like, no, let it sit, let it wait, so that you can have time to talk with the people at your table. So in the same way, take advantage of any opportunities to network and interact as a faculty member with other faculty members who are from those different fields. Discuss your research, discuss your current projects, your publications, and after that discussion, form a concept for a collaborative project. Think about how your disciplines complement one another and what sort of topic is compatible with your different perspectives in this small group. And of course, as always, make it practical. Approximately how much funding would you need to make that project work as a rough estimate? So dream, but then bring the balloon back down to earth and say, okay, I've got the balloon in my hand. How much is it worth? What dollar figure can I pin on this? How many people are needed to do this work? And how much time? The ideal collaborator, of course, has effective communication skills and brings experience and expertise needed for the project, typically has received previous funding, a person who meets deadlines. You don't want to work with somebody who doesn't meet deadlines now. Got to be practical. And someone who's skilled at communicating big picture ideas, such as impact and innovation. And note the indented bullet point. You could blend training or mentoring of an early stage investigator with bringing that early stage investigator onto your team. They contribute their expertise, you contribute your mentoring, your guidance, win-win all around. And remember to encourage that early stage investigator to become a reviewer as soon as possible, because again, that PhD, that stamp of approval to become, that you too can become an independent investigator, that means you have expertise. You have already done a guided, mentored research project, therefore you earned your PhD. Therefore, that means that you can be a reviewer. So encourage the early stage and junior folks around you to become reviewers just as you are and have been. So for a collaborative team, there's some idea 30,000 foot view questions, and there are also some very practical questions. So what's your rationale? What's the idea? What's the concept? Where are you going with this concept? All those sorts of questions. That's all together in that first question here. What is your rationale? Why are we working together? Why are we doing this? Are you ready to collaborate? Do you know how to work together with other people? Science is social. How will your team function? Look at the questions all on the right-hand side column. How will the leadership, management, and administration of your team look? How will you resolve conflict? How will you evaluate your collaboration? How long do you intend your collaboration to grow and develop? All these kinds of questions that you need to consider as you think about how your team will function. And then, of course, some of the practicalities. Do you have the technology? Do you have the resources? Do you have the time? How will you communicate? How will you coordinate? How will you make this happen? What are the logistics of doing this kind of work as a collaborative team? And of course, in terms of developing good collaborations, you would want to make sure that everyone has a role, everyone has responsibilities and obligations. Second bullet point down. Fourth bullet point down, determine authorship. Don't forget trainees. Fifth bullet point down, develop a plan for assigning intellectual property. This can be a little tricky if you're working with people from other institutions, people in other states, people in other countries. You may need to talk with intellectual property experts at your institution. You would want to, first bullet point, document what you would want to achieve and have those goals in front of you as you're moving through these collaborations. You would want to document access or restriction of access to relevant resources, making sure that everybody understands who has access to what and why. And then finally, the last two bullet points, you would want to make sure that you have a communication schedule and a timeline so that you can actually move this collaborative work forward. Now, for sustaining good collaborations, you'd want to communicate about all things, even if things aren't going well, which means, yes, you may have to have difficult conversations with a colleague. Remember that they're your colleague. Remember that you may be that person in the future who is, quote, the problem for everybody else because of something that's completely beyond your control. So be kind, be gracious, but also maintain accountability and make sure that people know that if they're going to be booted from the team, you would want to do that amicably or as amicably as possible. The last bullet point here. You would want to review your agreement at least annually, perhaps more often than that. You would want to continually assess whether or not the collaboration is working. You would want to publish and pursue funding at the same time, and you would want to acknowledge your collaborators' contributions. And that collaborators can be either apostrophe S as a single collaborator or S apostrophe as multiple collaborators. And of course, you'll want to leverage resources. Here's some mid-career and collaboration resources that might be valuable to you. Again, these are live links in the slides. There's an actual article called Grants and Funding at Mid-Career Planning with Purpose to Achieve Agency, Vitality, and Fulfillment that's been published within the last 5 or 10 years. And it's current enough to be relevant for where we are right now with the state of scientific investigation in this country. And now I'll turn it over to Chris Gray for the next 2 slides. He is the principal point of contact between Hanover and UT Dallas and manages the content of the queue that this webinar is a part of.
Thanks, Paul. So the final 2 slides, we just wanted to highlight some resources that Hanover provides that faculty at UTD have access to through our relationship with the university. The first here on this slide is our Grants Learning Center, which is an on-demand training resource that we launched in 2021. The resource provides self-paced interactive modules that help faculty learn about and develop proposals for specific funding competitions. So we currently have modules developed for NSF Career as well as NIH-R mechanisms. We're also building out additional modules this year and looking to add and expand to the resource. On the next slide, we have some resources related to our grants newsletters. The top 2 are our grant alerts and our grant digest. These are weekly and monthly publications that are focused on upcoming grant opportunities, both in the the research and programmatic spaces related to the healthcare and higher education industries. We also put out bi-monthly grants calendars across a number of topic areas and disciplines. You'll see the bullets at the bottom of the page providing an overview of some of the areas that we cover in the grants calendars. As I said, both of these are available to all faculty at UTD at no additional cost. It's based on our current relationship, so you can refer to these slides to sign up for those resources. Thank you.
Thanks much, Chris. Much appreciated. And now it's time for any Q&A.
Thank you, Paul. There are no questions from the audience at this time.
Well, let me say that many people are probably thinking, but don't want to say right now. But what's this about adding to my burden? What's this about speeding up? What's this about doing even more? What's this about giving back? I am tired. It's the middle of my career. I want to just take a moment, take a breather for a little bit. And let me tell you that means that you need a sabbatical or a fellowship or a time at some summer at somebody's national laboratory. And that means that you'll be able to rest, relax, refresh, rejuvenate, and recharge so that you can continue to move forward again with either the research you're doing now or some avenue of research that you have found interesting and that you want to move toward now that you are mid-career and now that you are comfortable with knowing what you can do and knowing how to do it. Second thing that people often think about at this stage is the question of, well, how do I know if I'm overburdening myself? You have a hand. Most people's hands have 5 fingers. That is the limit, okay? 1 is too few. 1 line of investigation is too few. You've put all of your investigatory power into 1 basket, 1 line of investigation. Obviously, if it doesn't move forward very well, or if it doesn't provide good results, then there are problems. So 2, at least 2, and perhaps 3, and perhaps as you become more adept at managing and juggling time, managing and juggling your commitments, managing and juggling your appointments, and your relationships with others professionally, then maybe you might expand to 4 or maybe 5. Beyond 5, probably not unless you're the Energizer Bunny and you think that you are never going to sleep and never going to do anything but stay in your lab, and present. That's it. Most of us are not like that. We're human beings. So because we're human beings, I want you to keep thinking about 5, and 5 being maximum in terms of the lines of investigation, and probably reducing down from that to 4 or even 3. But remember that as you think about those lines of investigation as an arc, as a trajectory across your career development, especially in terms of your research, think of segmenting those elements and think of how they might braid together or not, how they might weave together or not, and how they might or might not reflect each other and react to each other in terms of what you learn from each one of those segments. So continue to reassess, continue to think about where you are, where you were, and where you're going. And remember that the only invariant is time, so use it wisely.
All right. Once again, thank you for joining us today, Paul and Chris. We appreciate you sharing your expertise. Audience, thank you for joining us as well. Stay abreast of upcoming Office of Research and Innovation programs by following us on social media and subscribing to our newsletter. Next up, please join us for the Hanover Essentials of Competitive Proposals on Tuesday, March 7th at 12 noon. This information and the polite request to complete a brief survey about today's program can be found in the chat. Have a nice afternoon.